With all the problems we have seen and I have reported on with condos and HOAs in general over the past couple of years, it's not really a surprise that a lot of people want to stay away from them, and there's a ton of them for sale right now here in Florida. But there are people out there who are still taking chances on these properties, and it's interesting to find out why. So let's take a look at who's buying these condos still and why they're choosing to buy them, knowing that there are lots of problems. Well, the first thing is buyers who are looking for a deal right now are looking at condos because they're easier to score a deal on. In fact, 57% of US condos that sold in April of 2025 sold for less than their original asking price, according to Redfin. And there's always more demand for single-family home than condos in general. And right away you might think, well, that's only in Florida, Michael. Well, not really, because this story that we're talking about here comes out of Michigan. And in Michigan, the median listing price for condos is still hovering around $300,000, so not crazy expensive. So here's somebody who set aside $600,000 for a budget to buy a 4-bedroom condo in North Detroit. And this is a second home, by the way, because he has his primary residence in North Carolina. He was buying this place in order to be able to be closer to some of his family and make it easier to visit. And he also wanted a place that he wouldn't have to worry about any of the lawn or maintenance or maybe even security issues while he was out of town. In fact, that's one of my favorite things about owning a condo, especially now that I'm spending half the year away from Miami, essentially, being able to just close the hurricane shutters and lock all the doors and leave for, 5 months out of the year. That's some peace of mind that's hard to get when you have a single family home. So his budget that he set for the HOA dues was $1,000 a month, which definitely limited his options, but he was looking for a bare bones community, basically a place that didn't have a whole lot of amenities, because the more amenities a community has, well, the more it's going to cost. Just in the past year, condo fees nationwide have risen about 7%, but in Florida it's been more like 10%. But in Michigan, they've only gone up 3%, so not too bad. So this guy had his eye on a place that was listed for $650,000 back in November last year. Of course, it didn't sell. Well, what did they do? They pulled the same trick that all these real estate agents do and sellers do and think that it's going to somehow fool people. They pull it off the market and then they relist it at a new price. In this case, they actually relisted it at $585,000, so at least they were smart enough to knock a decent chunk of change off the price. HOA dues for this place were $585 a month. That included water, and the property tax bill averaged out to roughly $533 a month. He would also be inheriting a $300 per month special assessment in order to fix all the driveways at the condo complex. So they went back and forth and they ended up agreeing on an all-cash deal of $550,000. So he got it for $100,000 less than the original asking price. And the reason he decided to pay cash is because he says, there's no way I'm paying 6.81% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. And yeah, if you have the cash, you can save a boatload of money on interest, then yeah, why not? Also, condos can be difficult to finance, especially if the building is not in good physical or financial shape. In fact, you might not even be able to get a loan on some condos, and if you do, it's going to be a very risky loan. But in reality, if you're looking at buying a place like that, you should probably just keep looking. So what were the motivations behind this purchase? Well, the guy was able to get a deal. He got a $100,000 discount. I don't know what the property is really worth. I have no clue. But he was also able to get a place close to his daughter and be able to visit whenever he wants. And so once again, this purchase decision was fueled by a family matter. And that's how most home sales and purchases are driven by. They're driven by some sort of family issue. In fact, the seller of this condo inherited this condo from their parents when they passed away. So they sold it. And that's typically what most people do when they inherit a property. They sell it. And this just goes to show you one example, but it also highlights some of the pros and cons of looking into a condo right now. On the one hand, there are a ton of them for sale. There are 15% more condos for sale this year than there were a year ago, as well as the price is coming down more rapidly than single family homes. But the downside is you might have to deal with special assessments. You might have to deal with problems with neighbors that you didn't anticipate. You might have to deal with the HOA fees going up suddenly by 30 or 50% like I had to deal with. Those things happen to people. So it is a risk that you take. And I would say you don't have as much risk when you buy a single family home, because at least you're more in control of the type of expenses that come up, and you can kind of choose what to address and when. But that often also leads to people having a ton of deferred maintenance, which ends up making their property value go down over time anyways. And a lot of people have financial misconceptions about condos and don't fully understand what they're buying when they get into one. One of the main ones is that a lot of people buy a condo and think that it's just like owning a house, but that could not be further from the truth. It is not like owning a house at all. One of the biggest differences when it comes to owning a condo versus a house is that you are going to have shared responsibilities with your neighbors in terms of maintenance costs, but also it limits what you can and can't do with your own property. Like, yes, you can make upgrades to your unit, you can do things inside your own unit, but it comes with its set of limitations. It's not as unlimited or as free as having a single family house where you can just put on an addition. You can't just put on an addition to a condo, for example. You also might not have the option to make certain electrical or plumbing changes. And it's also more difficult to make major changes because not only do you need a permit a lot of times, but you also need to get approval from the condo association or the condo board. You also might not have control over other things like, what type of balcony railings you have or what type of windows you have, different things like that, the color of the exterior of the building. All of those things might be outside of your control as a condo owner. But I would think that would be common sense. I don't know if it is, but you would think most people would kind of inherently understand that this is what you're getting yourself into if you're going to buy a condo. But in case you didn't know, now you do. And the second thing is the condo fees, the lovely, lovely condo fees. This is obviously something you don't have when you own a house unless you buy in an HOA community, but these condo fees are often significantly higher than what you would pay if you bought a single family house in an HOA community. And people have different opinions about this. Some people think it's a huge waste of money and that these fees are, outrageous. Other people don't mind just paying the fee and it's kind of one and done. They don't have to do anything and don't have any maintenance. I fall somewhere in the middle on this category because I think the fees are excessive, especially here in Florida now. After we had the collapse in Surfside, my maintenance fees at my condo have gone up about 70% since I bought the place back at the beginning of 2022. And we're not really getting anything extra for those maintenance fees. The problem is insurance has been such a huge part of it. Because of that collapse, the insurance for these buildings has gone through the roof. And that's something that's outside of your control as the owner. The only thing you can really do is sell. But because it does include the insurance, which is the largest part of our maintenance fee, it includes the water, the sewer, the trash, all of the front desk staff, the cleaning staff, maintenance crews that work on the building, then do different things throughout the week. It does include all that stuff as well. And that's the part of the condo fees I think are actually worth it, because if you are somebody that doesn't want to lift a finger and you want to be able to focus on other things besides maintenance around the house 24/7, then it can be worth it. Some condo fees even include things like your electricity, or some do like grouped bundled cable and internet, things like that. So it can include quite a bit. And then of course, if there's amenities there, it's including things like the gym, the pool and the pool maintenance, a hot tub, a sauna, whatever you have, that can really add up. Those are things that can cost you a lot if you own a house as well. I mean, just having a pool alone might cost you $300 a month taking care of that pool. It also means you don't have to do chores like mowing the lawn or clearing snow from a driveway, things like that. And some people just appreciate that. So are condo fees a waste of money? They can be if you get kind of overcharged for things like what's happening here in Florida. Then yeah, I think it can be a waste of money. Was it always a waste of money? I don't think so. I think for a while there, especially when I was still selling real estate, condo fees were pretty reasonable. I remember selling 2-bedroom, 2-bath condos on the ocean, and the maintenance fees were $650 a month. That's not bad to have to do nothing, and including basically all of your utilities except for your electric bill. It's not bad, but obviously that's not the case anymore due to inflation and due to insurance and all the problems we have here. I would also caution people that if you are looking to buy a condo and if the condo fees are suspiciously low, then that can be a sign that they're not collecting enough and they're going to have to raise those fees a lot very soon, especially in Florida, since now it's going to be a law sooner than later that buildings are going to have to start collecting full reserves, and that can make the costs shoot up tremendously. And then of course there are the special assessments. This is everybody's favorite when it comes to condos. You have your condo fees that you have to pay every month no matter what, and those typically go up over the years, but also you have special assessments. These are extra expenses that basically are not accounted for in the regular condo fees. When some kind of surprise maintenance project comes up that they don't have enough money for, well then they have to levy a special assessment on the owners and you have to pay your fair share. That fair share is usually based on the percentage of ownership you have in the building. So the larger your unit is, you pay based on your square footage. That's the Memorial Day planes you're hearing, by the way. These things are so loud. And you can kind of think of a special assessment as like being a regular homeowner in a single family house and all of a sudden you need to pay for a new roof. Well, that's going to cost 40, 50 grand all of a sudden. Money that you weren't expecting to spend. That's the type of thing you're looking at with a special assessment. Or maybe your HVAC system goes out in your house and now you have to pay another 10 or 15 grand for that. That's the same thing as having a special assessment at a condo. The problem with the special assessments we're getting here in Florida right now are sometimes even higher than that. I've seen people paying 6 figures in special assessments because the building just has so much deferred maintenance. And also the other part of the problem is because all these buildings now need maintenance all at the same time, guess who's taking advantage of that situation? Yeah, that's right. The contractors are definitely taking advantage of people with this, and it's obvious with how much they're charging, guys. So should these special assessments really be this high? Probably not. But since there's so much demand for so much work and there's only so few contractors to go around, they are raising their prices significantly. Now, hopefully the plan is in the future, especially here in Florida, is to have fewer special assessments because all the buildings are going to have to start collecting full reserves by the beginning of next year. Well, then buildings should have a lot more money in reserve for unexpected repairs or unexpected expenses that come up, so they shouldn't have to levy a special assessment. So you have to trade one for the other. If you have low HOA fees, then you are going to have special assessments when something comes up. If you have higher fees, then the building may have the money when they have to do something and might not have to charge you anything extra. And the worst part is watching those fees climb. Like for me, when we bought our condo, we knew that we were getting a special assessment. We knew that before we bought the place. We factored that in when we bought it, the price we paid, everything, right? But one thing we didn't anticipate was seeing our maintenance fees jump by 60% the following year, and then has gone up a little bit more since then. So it's been about 70% cumulatively over the past couple of years. And that's something that you really can't factor in. You really don't know what's going to happen. That all came as a surprise due to the huge increases in insurance that Florida had seen. But in general, you can expect these fees to go up annually because everything goes up. Inflation continues to go up until we see deflation, if we ever see it. You can expect these condo fees to continue going up. Just like any cost that you have to repair your own house, it's the same thing. Now, one thing I will say as a condo owner and somebody who bought in a high-rise building, I think I would buy another condo, but never in another high-rise building. And let me tell you why. Because in a high-rise, it just have more problems because the building is larger, so the maintenance issues are at a larger scale. They're more expensive to take care of because the building is larger. And yes, there are more residents and more people to pitch in and help pay for it, but also being oceanfront, that makes the problems even more expensive and more frequent because let's face it, you're on the ocean and that salty water and the salty air is constantly picking away at the building 24/7. So keeping it repaired and keeping it in good physical condition is an ongoing job. It never ends. So if I were to buy another condo in the future, first of all, it probably would not be oceanfront, but second, it also wouldn't be in a high-rise building. I would buy either in a low-rise building, something that's 2 or 3 stories, or maybe a mid-rise building that's like maybe 5 to 8 stories maximum, a much smaller place. So that way, when problems come up, the scale of the problems are also a lot smaller. And now, for example, my building's undergoing concrete restoration and it's taking forever. Why is it taking forever? Because the building is huge. So if you had to undergo concrete restoration in a smaller building, the project would be started and finished a lot faster just due to the smaller scale of the project. So you can just kind of think of it like the bigger the building and the closer it is to the water, the more expensive and the bigger the problems will be. Versus if you buy in a smaller complex that's not on the water, your problems and costs are going to be lower. So if I were to buy another condo in the future, it would probably be like a townhouse situation or in a small low-rise building, like I was saying, where the maintenance fees are a lot lower and are less prone to spiking as much as they did. And if there ever is a special assessment, it's not going to be 50 grand, you know? But what happens if your condo is on the Fannie Mae blacklist? Because this is something that more and more buildings across the country are facing, not just in Florida. The highest concentration of them on the blacklist are in Florida, but they're not just in Florida. But the concentration here is huge, no doubt. There's about 1,438 buildings on the Fannie Mae blacklist, and about 696 of them are in South Florida. So about half. And of course, the biggest problem is that Fannie Mae doesn't share this data and doesn't really disclose to anybody if you're on the blacklist or not. They'll just deny a mortgage if you try to get a loan in one of these buildings. And if you see a couple of these conventional loans denied in the same building, well then that's a telltale sign that you are on the blacklist. And the most common reasons that a condo ends up on the blacklist is deferred maintenance, that's a big one, but also pending litigation and insufficient reserves. So any building that has been keeping up with the physical condition of the building and also the financials, they shouldn't be on the blacklist. You should still be able to get a mortgage in a building like that, no problem. So even though this information is not disclosed with the public, lenders can still get a picture of why any certain condo is on this blacklist and hopefully help people get off of it, because once you're aware of why you're on it, well then you can take the necessary steps to get off of it. Even having insufficient insurance coverage, according to Fannie Mae, can be a reason to be on this blacklist. Like for example, if your building has a deductible that exceeds 5% of the policy limit, no guaranteed replacement costs or coverage based on actual cash value rather than replacement costs, then you're going to have to up your insurance coverage in order to get off that blacklist. And of course, the other problems can be fixed as well. If it's deferred maintenance issues, get the building up to code. You know, if it's inadequate reserve funding, you're going to have to start collecting more money and build those reserve funds. The problem is those things take years. This is not something, a quick turnaround that you can just do in a few months. It could take, you know, years or even a decade for a building to get off this blacklist in order to make the proper amount of repairs, get the proper amount of insurance coverage, and get the building up to financial snuff. Now also, Ron DeSantis, the governor here in Florida, is set to sign House Bill 913, which is going to modify the condo rules that we have in place right now. And if DeSantis signs it, which it seems like he will, what this will do is it will take effect on July 1st of this year, and it will extend the deadline by 1 year for structural integrity reserve studies, which the current deadline is December 31st this year. So it's basically just kicking the can down the road of how much time you have to do one of these studies, because last I reported on this, about 60% of condos were not complying with this and did not have the structural integrity reserve study done. And I was even saying back then, like, what are they going to do with all these buildings that aren't complying? You know, are they going to fine them? Are they going to condemn them? Well, it turns out they're just going to kick the can down the road an extra year. And if he signs this bill, which it sounds like he will, it will also allow a temporary pause in reserve funding for 2 years immediately following a milestone inspection and give condo associations more flexibility on meeting reserve requirements. So that's one of the biggest problems too, like we were just talking about. So it's going to allow buildings to delay meeting that full reserve requirement to soften the financial blow to condo owners. So basically what all this does is it just delays all of the laws that have already been in place. You know, all the deadlines were supposed to be by the end of this year when it came to the full reserve funding, when it came to the structural integrity reserve study, but instead they're just kind of pushing it all down the road. Which honestly, I'm not surprised, because that's what government does best, right? Is they're very good at delaying problems and just kind of pushing it off into the future and letting somebody else handle it. Because by the time, you know, it's a problem again, maybe somebody else will be in office and it'll be their problem. That's the same thing the federal government's doing right now with extending this huge budget deficit and different things like that. You know, they push off these problems so far into the future that by the time we have to revisit them, it doesn't matter, because it's new people in charge that are going to have to deal with it. They choose to do the same thing. They kick the can down the road, and that's how we've gotten in so much trouble with everything. I mean, personally, I'm happy that even though they're going to be kicking the can down the road, that my building is still moving forward with everything and complying with the way things are right now and just getting it over with. Everybody in the building just seems to kind of want to, you know, make it a great place to live for the most part and get our building up to the latest standards. Everybody's gonna have to pay their fair share. And basically, if you can't afford it, then you either need to finance it or you need to sell. That's kind of the position a lot of people are in right now. And personally, I would say, as a condo owner, if you're facing major special assessments and you can't afford them, and you're looking at taking out a second mortgage, a home equity loan, or doing one of their financing terms of 8 to 10 years to pay for this special assessment, you can't afford it, man. Sell. Just get rid of it while you can, because it's only going to be a matter of time before something else comes up that you're going to have to pay for. And next time, you might be out of gas. You might not be able to finance it. There might not be any credit left, or you might not be able to afford that extra payment anyway. So you're just kind of also kicking the can down the road and delaying the inevitable if you don't sell due to not being able to afford these expenses. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. That's why you see so many condos for sale right now. People are coming to the realization that this is probably the smartest thing to do. I should just sell it now, let it be somebody else's problem, even if I got to take a hit on the price. So going back to my original point, who's buying these condos? Well, it's going to be somebody who's willing to step into those shoes, take the risk, and maybe just buys it as a second home. It's not a big deal. They can afford the extra expenses. Or somebody that's looking for a cheaper alternative to a single family home. Like, for example, all these houses I'm walking by, you know, you don't see anything less than $2 million in this neighborhood, whereas you can buy a condo still here in Miami Beach, a similar sized condo, for less than $1 million. So it all depends. Depends on your preferences for lifestyle, your budget, all kinds of things. And even me, even though my experience owning a condo hasn't been the greatest, like I said, I wouldn't swear it off forever and say I wouldn't buy another one ever, but I would buy a different type of condo that would be less problematic to own. That would be my advice to anybody looking to get into one, or somebody considering a condo versus a house. Try to buy something in a smaller complex with lower HOA fees, less amenities, because all that stuff means less problems and less expenses. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.